Welcome back to the Deep Dive. If you joined us for part one, you know we're digging deep into the autonomous vehicle revolution. And this isn't just theory anymore, is it? It's happening fast. Last time, we really focused on the players, the manufacturers, the tech, the race to get these vehicles working. Today, we're zooming out, way out. We're looking at the big picture, the really long-term effects, if or maybe when autonomous vehicles become widespread. What does it mean for you owning a car, how you'll travel, how everything gets shipped, and, the bigger societal shifts?
Yeah, exactly. Our mission today is really to sift through all the noise, all the speculation, and pull out the key insights from our sources. We want to help you understand the really complex ways autonomous mobility is going to change things. It's a massive transformation, and it's good to be informed.
Okay, let's dive in then. The most immediate thing, probably the most personal impact, is just how you get around. And what really jumps out from the research is this idea of a potential collapse in the cost of getting a ride somewhere. Why is that expected?
It really just boils down to economics. Simple as that, almost. Our sources are pretty clear. The biggest chunk of the cost for, say, an Uber or a taxi today, it's the person driving, the human labor. You take that cost out, and suddenly these autonomous mobility as a service options, MaaS as they call it, could become dramatically cheaper.
Dramatically cheaper. Cheap enough to make you rethink owning a car altogether.
Potentially, yes. For a lot of people, the total cost of using these on-demand robotaxis could actually be less than owning, insuring, fueling, and maintaining your own vehicle.
That's a huge shift. So how do the experts see this playing out? Is it just one big robo-taxi company taking over everything?
Well, not necessarily. Our sources point to two main models emerging, and they're kind of competing visions. First, you've got what we can call fleet-owned MaaS, think Waymo, think Cruise, big companies owning and operating large fleets of these robo-taxis. It's a centralized approach.
Okay, like a driverless taxi service, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But then there's this other idea, a more disruptive one maybe, decentralized MaaS. This is the vision Tesla talks about a lot. The idea here is that you, as an individual owner of an autonomous Tesla, could let your car join a shared network when you're not using it.
Like while I'm at work or sleeping.
Precisely. Your car goes out, picks people up, earns you money. Passive income. It creates this whole new category of people, prosumers maybe, producing and consuming mobility.
That's fascinating. But hang on, there's a bit of a contradiction here, isn't there? Because while the cheap robo-taxis might make you want to ditch your car, the idea of having your own personal AV, well, that sounds incredibly convenient too. Imagine just relaxing, working, sleeping on a long commute. Or sending your car out to run errands by itself. That could actually make people want to own one more, right?
Right.
Especially outside big cities.
That's exactly the tension the sources highlight. It's a real paradox. You see surveys showing, say, 65% of people would consider giving up ownership for good autonomous services, but then others say no, they want a personal AV. They're not giving up ownership, they're just upgrading the type of car they own. So the likely outcome, probably not one size fits all. It's going to be a mix. A hybrid model. It'll depend heavily on where you live, dense city versus suburb versus rural area. It'll depend on the final cost, the actual convenience, and this is key, government policies.
That makes sense. It won't be uniform.
Yeah.
So given those pressures, do you lean towards one model being stronger eventually? Or is it really just going to stay fragmented?
My read of the sources suggests the hybrid model is almost certain. Fleet-owned might dominate in, say, Manhattan, where parking is a nightmare and efficiency is paramount. But out in the suburbs or rural areas, the convenience of a personal AV you can summon anytime, that goes anywhere, that might win out. The deeper point is, I think, that the tech enables different futures. It doesn't dictate just one. Our choices, our policies, they'll shape which future emerges where.
Right, it's not just technology determinism. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Commercial transport, logistics. This seems just as massive.
Oh, absolutely. If not more so in some ways. The impact on how goods move could be revolutionary.
Starting with the big rigs, long-haul trucking. Why is that seen as such a prime candidate for early automation?
Several reasons. First, highways are much simpler environments than city streets, more predictable. Second, the industry has well-known issues. Chronic driver shortages, for one. High operating costs. So companies like Aurora, Kodiak, Daimler's Torque Robotics, they're focusing hard on this hub-to-hub model.
Hub-to-hub, meaning?
Meaning the trucks drive themselves autonomously on the long highway stretches between transfer hubs, usually near cities. Then human drivers take over for the tricky final bits navigating city streets to the distribution center or warehouse. The first and last mile, they call it.
Okay, and the benefits.
Huge potential benefits. Trucks could run almost 24/7, massively increasing asset utilization, better fuel efficiency from smoother driving, and ultimately lower shipping costs.
Lower shipping costs are always good. But it's not just the big trucks, right?
Right.
What about getting stuff that lasts a little bit right to your door, last mile delivery?
Yeah, that's another key area. That final leg is often the most expensive part of shipping. So you see companies like Nuro developing these small, low-speed delivery robots. No space for people, just goods. Groceries, packages, pizza. They're partnering with Walmart, Kroger, Domino's.
Those little pod things you sometimes see pictures of.
Exactly. And then there's Gatic, focusing on the middle mile, using autonomous box trucks for repetitive routes between, say, a big distribution center and local stores for someone like Walmart, automating those predictable B2B runs.
And the economic argument underpinning all of this commercial stuff,
Yeah,
it seems pretty stark when you look at the numbers.
it really is. The cost per mile projections tell the story. Your own gasoline car, maybe 60 to 80 cents per mile all in. A ride-hail service with a human driver, much higher, like $2, maybe even $3 a mile. A huge chunk of that is paying the driver.
Okay.
Now, the projection for a shared robo-taxi, somewhere in the range of 25 to 50 cents per mile.
Wow, that's a massive difference.
It is. That's the quantitative power of removing the human labor cost. It's the single biggest factor driving this whole potential shift in transportation economics.
So what does this mean for, well, the price of everything you buy and how fast it gets to you? It sounds like fundamental changes are coming. And these changes in how we move, how goods move, they naturally bleed into the bigger picture. How our cities work, how society functions. Let's talk about that. How are EVs going to reshape our cities?
One of the most dramatic potential changes is what some call the parking revolution. Think about how much incredibly valuable land in cities is just dedicated to storing cars that aren't moving. It's staggering. Some estimates say up to a third of the land in some U.S. cities.
Third, wow.
Yeah. But shared EVs, they don't need prime parking spots. Between rides, they can go off to cheaper peripheral depots for charging, cleaning, whatever.
So you free up all that downtown land currently used for parking garages and street parking.
Exactly. It's a massive opportunity. Redevelop it for affordable housing, parks, businesses. It's a chance to fundamentally rethink urban space, maybe even undo some of the damage from decades of prioritizing cars.
That sounds amazing. But there's always a but, isn't there? Let's talk congestion. This seems like a real double-edged sword.
It absolutely is. On the one hand, EVs could reduce congestion big time. They can drive closer together platooning. They accelerate and brake more smoothly. They can communicate with each other and with traffic signals to optimize flow. V2V, V2I communication. This could really increase how many cars a road can handle.
Okay, that's the positive side. What's the negative?
The negative is that if rides become super cheap and super convenient, people might just travel more.
Induced demand.
Precisely. More trips, longer commutes because the travel time isn't as burdensome. And you might even get these zombie cars, empty EVs just circling around to avoid parking fees or waiting for their next ride.
Zombie cars. That could actually make congestion worse.
It could. Significantly worse, potentially. The net effect. Honestly, it's really uncertain based on the sources. It highlights that the technology itself isn't a magic bullet. Whether AVs unclog our cities or gridlock them will probably depend heavily on policy choices.
Like what kind of policies?
Things like dynamic road pricing, charging more to drive during peak hours or in congested areas. Congestion charges like London has will need smart management to handle that potential extra demand.
So city planners have their work cut out for them. This also ties into the sprawl dilemma, right?
Yes, exactly. If that long commute suddenly becomes productive time, you can work, sleep, watch movies. Does that make people more willing to live even further away from the city center?
It might, yeah.
And that could undermine years of effort trying to encourage denser, more walkable communities. Plus, more miles driven, even if electric, means a bigger environmental footprint in other ways. It's a real concern.
Definitely a complex picture.
Yeah.
But let's touch on a really positive potential aspect: social equity and accessibility.
This is where EVs hold incredible promise. Think about the elderly, people with disabilities, anyone who can't drive currently. On-demand autonomous vehicles could offer them unprecedented independence. Access to healthcare, jobs, social events, things many of us take for granted.
That's a huge potential benefit.
It is, and companies are thinking about it. Cruise, for example, has specifically worked on designs for wheelchair-accessible EVs from the start.
But again, there's a flip side, a potential downside here too.
There is. The risk of a new divide. Without careful planning and policy, we could see these Convenient, affordable robotaxi services clustering in wealthy, dense areas where they're most profitable. Lower income communities, rural areas, they could get left behind, creating mobility deserts.
Hmm.
And even if the per mile cost is low, it might still be too expensive for some compared to, say, subsidized public transport. You could end up with a two-tiered system, shiny AVs for the well-off and maybe underfunded public transit for everyone else.
That potential divide is worrying. Do the sources suggest any fixes beyond just policy? Like, could the market itself solve this, or is it really down to regulation?
The consensus seems to lean heavily towards policy. Market forces alone tend to concentrate services where profits are easiest. Ensuring equitable access will likely require things like subsidies, mandating service coverage areas, or creating incentives for companies to serve all communities, not just the most profitable ones.
So careful governance is absolutely critical to ensure the benefits are shared widely. Okay, let's zoom out again to the economy as a whole. This transition. It's described as an economic shockwave, creating massive value but also huge disruption.
Yeah, shockwave feels appropriate. The macroeconomic impact numbers being thrown around are just mind-boggling. Think about all the hours people spend driving. Trillions of hours globally. Much of that is unproductive time.
Right. You're just stuck focusing on the road.
EVs could free up a lot of that time. People could work, shop, learn, be entertained while traveling. This could lead to a massive productivity boom. One analysis we looked at from ARK Invest projects this could add something like $26 trillion to annual global GDP by 2030.
26 trillion annually.
That's their projection. They claim the impact could be bigger than the steam engine, robotics, and IT combined. Now, that's a bold claim, but it gives you a sense of the scale some people are envisioning.
It certainly does. But with that potential boom comes the inevitable downside.
The labor market disruption. This is probably the biggest, most difficult social challenge. Millions of people drive for a living. Truckers, taxi drivers, ride-hail drivers, delivery drivers. Many of those jobs are at very high risk of automation.
That's a massive number of jobs potentially displaced.
It is. It's one of the starkest examples of AI's potential impact on labor. And it means policymakers need to think proactively. Retraining programs, stronger social safety nets. These will be crucial conversations.
And the disruption ripples out beyond just drivers, hitting entire industries. Let's talk industry-level disruption. First up, insurance.
Yeah, the traditional car insurance model is based on human drivers making errors. It's fundamentally about individual risk. In an autonomous world, if there's a crash, who's liable? Probably not the passenger. It's likely the manufacturer, the software developer, the fleet operator.
So liability shifts from millions of individuals to a smaller number of corporations.
Exactly. That requires totally new kinds of risk models, new commercial insurance products. The personal auto insurance industry, as we know it, could shrink dramatically or transform completely.
Okay, what about auto repair?
Well, the promise is that AVs will be much, much safer. Some studies project up to 88% fewer injury-causing accidents.
Which is fantastic news from a safety perspective.
Absolutely fantastic. But the direct consequence is far fewer damaged cars needing repairs. The collision repair industry is likely facing a significant contraction.
In energy.
The link here is with electrification. Most dedicated EVs being developed are built on electric vehicle platforms. They just pair well together the power needs, the smooth control. So the rise of large managed fleets of EVs will inevitably accelerate the shift away from gasoline and diesel. More pressure on the fossil fuel industry.
So lots of disruption. But you mentioned value creation too. Where does that come from beyond just productivity gains?
Well, think about what the inside of a car becomes when you're not driving. It's no longer just transport, it's a mobile space.
Right. A third space almost.
Exactly. This unlocks what people are calling the passenger economy. Companies vying to offer you services during your ride. In-vehicle entertainment, mobile commerce, productivity tools, targeted advertising, turning travel time into economic time.
So your car becomes another screen, another platform for digital services.
Pretty much. And there's another huge source of value, data monetization. These AVs are packed with sensors, cameras, LiDAR, radar, constantly scanning their surroundings.
Generating unbelievable amounts of data about our streets, traffic patterns, infrastructure.
Precisely. When that data is aggregated, anonymized, it becomes incredibly valuable for real-time traffic management, urban planning, retailers wanting foot traffic analytics, cities monitoring road conditions.
So the fleet operators could have a whole new B2B business just selling that data.
Potentially, yes. Ethically managed, of course, but the value is definitely there.
Wow. So wrapping our heads around this,
Mm.
what does it all mean for your job, maybe? Your insurance? How you shop? It seems like the effects are just going to sweep across almost everything. This journey towards a fully autonomous future, it's definitely happening. But as we've explored today, it feels, well, maybe messier and more complicated than people thought a few years ago.
I think that's fair to say. The purely technical challenges, while still immense, are maybe not the biggest hurdles anymore. Now, the really tough nuts to crack are things like regulation, proving safety to a skeptical public, building business models that actually make money given the huge upfront costs, and dealing with all these societal impacts we've discussed.
Proving safety seems key, not just being safe, but convincing everyone that you're safe.
Exactly. Achieving superhuman safety is one thing. Demonstrating it, getting regulators and the public comfortable with it, that's a huge challenge. Then navigating different rules in different cities, states, countries, and managing that massive driver displacement issue. These are the big roadblocks now.
It really highlights how much this whole revolution depends not just on brilliant engineering, but also on navigating business strategy, public policy, and building trust. What strikes you as the most fascinating non-tech hurdle they face?
For me, it really is that social license to operate. It's this intangible thing. The tech can be perfect, the economics can work on paper, but if people don't trust it, if communities don't accept it, it won't succeed at scale. It requires a level of transparency, communication, and genuine engagement with public fears that goes way beyond just building a good car. It's about building societal acceptance. That, I think, is incredibly challenging and fascinating.
That's a great point. So as these driverless vehicles keep rolling closer, it really puts the onus back on us, doesn't it? What responsibility do we have as individuals, as communities, policymakers, to make sure this future isn't just possible, but actually works? Safe, affordable, accessible, and maybe even better for everyone.
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? Ensuring this technology serves humanity broadly, not just narrowly. It's a deep dive that definitely continues long after this conversation ends.
We hope you enjoyed this two-part series on the autonomous revolution. See you next time.
Bye for now.